in Hall A today, Annabelle Berrios, presenting an embodied exploration of ancestry in place.
Hi. So I want to start by practicing what Jason brought to us, the rhythm in the pause. I want to just take a moment to just try to see if I find it, and encourage you guys to find it. So if you could just close your eyes just briefly. And just invite a deep breath. And notice if you can find that current coming all the way down to your toes. And when you're ready, just open your eyes.
You found the rhythm.
Yes. The place is helping too. So I'm wondering, how many of you here have gone away on vacation? Ever? Raise your hand. You've gone away on vacation somewhere. So maybe you've taken pictures of the place that you've gone away on vacation, maybe even posted them on Facebook so other people can see. Any guilty parties? Yeah? No. So I remember there was a time back when I was working like 60 hours a week in a corporate setting that I saw vacations as the time to get away from my life. And the purpose of picking a really good place to get away was that I was going to learn as much as I possibly could about this place so I could come back and show everybody how smart I was, and how, even though I was working a gazillion hours a year, I was going away on vacation to learn about a gazillion million things about the Aztecs, about the Mayans, about everybody, and I'm going to show them with these pictures how smart I am. Or I'm going to just land in some beach in Mexico with a Corona or a Pacifico next to me and just die. But then something shifted, something happened. I was taking a vacation to Mexico. I was in Huatulco, which is in the Pacific coast, and I picked this place called Villa Paita. And Villa Paita is this house that is up on a cliff with a 180-degree view of the Pacific Ocean. And with this house that is built with organic materials, that is actually half indoor house and half outdoor house. In fact, the pool is half inside the living room and half outside. And I'm sleeping the first night that I'm staying in this house, thinking that this is just a vacation, a normal vacation where I'm going to pack in a lot of things and find out a lot of exciting things to bring back home. And what happens is that I get awakened by the birds, and there are these sounds like rah, 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 and there's like a crescendo. It's like an opera, so it starts rah, 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 maybe like the rhythms that Jason was talking about, and then it's like rah, 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 rah. I'm getting all anxious. I have to get up. I have to see what's going on. So I get up from my bed. I throw something on. I go to the edge of the cliff, and I just look down, and I see these rocks, and I see where the foam is forming around the rocks in the Pacific, and I see these black birds, and they're doing these elliptical movements and round movements, and they're moving in patterns and rhythms, and they seem to be doing a dance. And the sounds are getting higher and higher and higher, and I look up at the distance and I see on the horizon these lines, like they're painted on, and I see like a line of pink, and a line of yellow, and a line of red, and the sunrise. And I was so moved. And I didn't know, that's the first time I realized, looking back, that I started asking myself, does this place see me too? I mean, like, I'm looking at the birds, but do they know I'm here? And does this place have its own consciousness, like its own personality, soul, something? And, you know, are we affecting one another? And is my body at all involved in all of this? And most of all, like, who cares? Because when I said this to my partner at the time, my partner said to me, who cares? Right? Let's go diving. So I ask you to hold these questions with me as I go through my presentation, as I share with you my journey of how I held the questions, how I came to want to hold the questions, and why it mattered to me. So this all started with, okay, so I'm having this relationship with this thing called place and nature, but how did I come to be in relationship with it? And this brought me to ask myself questions of my ancestry and the indigenous people of Puerto Rico, which is the place that I grew up. How do they see nature? How do they see the humans vis-a-vis nature? So I find out, looking at the creation myth of the Taino Indians of Puerto Rico, which back then was called Boriquen before the Spaniards arrived, that there was the primordial mother, Atabey, and she comes from nothing. Like, she's just nothingness, pure potentiality, darkness, void. And she has two sons, the good son and the bad son, according to them. So the good son, his name is Yokahu. And Yokahu does everything that a good son should do. He creates the earth and the stars and the sun, and everything grows, and everything is pretty, and everything is flowing, and there are 5 elements, and everything works. And then there's Huracan. Huracan, hurricane, you can see where I'm going with this. Not the most popular guy. So while his brother is creating all these things, including the first humans, Huracan is undoing. That's how he's seen. He's undoing everything because he's jealous. So he's responsible for earthquakes, for floods, for tsunamis, all kinds of disasters. So meanwhile, the human beings love Yokahu. They see this mountain in the central range of Puerto Rico that is called El Yunque, which is a very tall, considered a sacred mountain, whose peak is always enveloped in clouds. They see that as the sacred mountain and the mountain of Yokahu because that mountain is slowing down the intensity of the hurricanes when they come. So they go there and they pray and they want their beauty and they want their fertility and they want their happy life, and thank God this mountain is here to stop that evil guy. And in fact, they see even the Carib Indians as associated with the bad son, right, with the bad god. These Carib Indians are seen as very violent, and they are associated with that. And in fact, when the Spaniards arrive, they believe that the Spaniards, because they see their world as so split, they see the Spaniards as messengers of Yokahu. So they see them as the good guys. And when they identify themselves to the Spaniards, they say, we're the Taínos. And that wasn't even their name. Taíno just means we're the good guys. We're the good ones. We're not those other people. So I was like, oh my God, there's already this split, even in the deities already. And is that existing in my body? And how does that affect how I perceive the world? How did I come to this? I decided to move to California, and I moved to California to attend CIIS, and I had ended a 13-year career in the law as a litigator, and I had ended a 10-year marriage. And I was walking away from everything that was known to me, and I felt a lot like Huracan, basically. California felt like Huracan, you know, there is the protection that I have, much like the Spaniards gave protection, or the conquerors gave protection. I had the protection of my culture, I had the protection of my marriage, I had the protection of a well-trotted path in a respectable position, and here I am going off to be with the hippies and follow my bliss in California. I did not feel protected at all. I did not feel grounded in my body. And I felt like I was just constantly moving, running away, running away. And I needed to feel grounded, and I was looking for that in myself, and I started having dreams, and this images coming in meditation, and what was coming in my meditation was Mother Atabey. It was the spirit of the island. It was the mother spirit that was behind the split, and she was calling me back, and I was like, no. No, no, no. And she's like, come home, come home. And I'm going, no, no, you don't understand. I couldn't drive farther away in the continental United States to get far away from the East Coast, from my old life. And what I didn't realize was that what I wanted to divorce was not my mother nature, it was my mother culture, and the parts of my mother culture that were not working. So because the call to go back to Puerto Rico became so incessant, I bought a ticket, I gave in, and I decided to prepare myself. I was going to take some practices so I could be strong and I could get there and I could know what I was doing, and I was not going to be undone by the disapproval of my family and everybody else that thought I was absolutely insane for leaving my life and moving to California. So one of the ways in which I did this was a practice called movement and sound. And this practice I learned studying improvisational theater. And the idea is that I allow a movement to arise, uncensored by my mind, and then I allow a sound to become with that movement. So I'm in my living room, it's sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm doing all kinds of stuff that looks like breakdance. And one day, I just had this pain in my lower belly, like I couldn't believe the pain that I felt. And I had this feeling of like the unwanted child again, like the unwanted one. And I was thinking about my arrival in this body. I was thinking about my arrival in the house that I grew up in Puerto Rico, which I'll call house from now on. And you know, my mother had me at 41 years old. She had already her kids. She didn't want to have one more child. It was pretty traumatic for her, actually. And I kept being reminded of this. And I remember entering this house, which, by the way, it's, you know, I live in this tropical island, right? But the house is a cement, low house that is in the financial district, that is all cement, with the patio paved over, with nothing breathing, nothing alive, because everything creates a mess. You see, wildness creates a mess. We don't want a mess. So we have plastic plants, we have porcelain plants, we have silk plants, but nothing alive. It's out there. And in fact, my mother prided herself that this house was the house that everybody assembled in when? During hurricanes. That house was hurricane-proof. Nothing moved. And in that house, stillness. So I remember entering this house, and I remember I had a pink room with pink walls and pink curtains and pink rug. But when I moved aside the pink for the curtain, what did I see but a wall of the neighboring house? And this was the room that I spent a lot of time in because I wasn't able to express. Anytime I expressed emotions that were in complete agreement with what was going on inside of my house, when I wasn't conforming, I was sent to my room. My mother believed that if you suffered alone your feelings, that would build a lot of character. So I spent a lot of time locked in that room. And I started noticing when I was doing these exercises of movement and sound that my room was living in my body. I had traveled to California to get away from house, and the house was living in my body. What? It was in my throat. So I realized that the first body geography lesson that I got was that I had this peninsula. You know, I was born in a peninsula, the peninsula of San Juan, the peninsula of Santurce. And my neck and my head kind of formed this peninsula, and I grew up in a walled city. And much like that walled city, I had built this wall here, where I had cut off my expression. So of course the warmth of my heart could not come and hold this faulty logic that was living up here. And certainly not the fire of my personal power and my ability to move and really do what I needed to do for myself. So this is the first time that I started noticing this. Another practice that I did, and I did many more than I can mention here, was craniosacral treatments. And the reason I did that was that because I was getting subtly manipulated by tiny little bones in my body while having a dialogue with the therapist, I was able to acknowledge myself what was going on in my body, and I noticed that the split in my body lived in different ways. For example, the left side of my body was a lot tighter and weaker than the right side of my body, which coincidentally, the left side of my body is the feminine side, and the right side of my body is the masculine side. So in dreams, the house started talking to me. I had actually opened this up foolishly because I believed Craig Chalquist when he told me that this was a good idea to do. And the house started saying that I needed to breathe into different parts of the body because it turned out that the house wanted redemption. The house wanted its fire back. And it started guiding me in different locations in my body where I could bring my life back. One time I was having a session and my left hip started talking to me. And it said, you have to go to Loíza. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And I'm trying to, my first instance is always my mind is trying to block out whatever is coming up, all these signals. So by breathing, warming the space, opening this up, opening the conversation. Loíza is a town in Puerto Rico where the ocean meets the rivers. And it's also where the runaway slaves would hide. And it's interesting because mangroves grow naturally there, and there was a legend that said that the mangroves were so generous that if the slaves ran away to the mangroves, they would magically turn into mangroves, and the Spaniards would not find them. It is also the town of Yuisa, and Yuisa is the one female Taino chief in Puerto Rico. And she's the one that actually had to trade away her power for what? Safety, protection. She married a Spaniard, she married a conqueror, and walked away from something that she was her birthright, that she built. And I realized that this was a direct connection to my own personal power. Not to mention that Loíza is the town of African dance, and that this hip just kind of wanted to loosen up, it wanted to move, it wanted to be let loose. Because again, it was that split of the house where the wildness was kept outside and the rational or the concrete was what lived. And then the house started guiding me in active imagination. The house said, you know, we're done with this. You know, there's a lot we can go through about what doesn't work, but you've got to help me reimagine me being healthy. And what would that look like? So I started sitting with house, and it started showing me what it wanted. And it wanted flowers inside, and everything had to be done through the 5 senses. Because the 5 senses correspond to the 5 elements, and those elements wanted to make their way in the concrete. So what would it smell like? What would the smell of the jasmine flowers outside? What would happen if they could be actually in? In my mother's house, the windows were always closed because it was freezing cold air conditioner, even though it was super hot outside. So you couldn't really smell, you couldn't get the air, you couldn't get the sounds. What if those were open? What if the condensation from the dew could be felt inside? What if the flowers were natural inside? And so on. And through a lot of these practices, I started feeling stronger and stronger, like there was a softness in my body, like I could feel the energy running all the way down to my legs and my feet. And I thought, I'm strong, I can go back to Puerto Rico. It's been 3 years, and I have no husband, I'm no longer a lawyer, but I can do it, I can do it. So I went, and the first 3 days I spent in the rainforest. And I knelt in the river, and I was huddled by canopies of bamboo and coconut trees, and my knees scraped the smooth rocks and clear waterfall. And in there, I felt like I was being baptized by Atabe. I felt like she took me back as her daughter. And I felt inside like there were rivers and there were mangroves in my belly and my breasts were coconuts, and I just felt completely fluid. And in fact, the house didn't change. The house was still, in fact, the house was worse. Nature was not inside, but I felt different. I felt grounded and I felt calm. So when I came back, I thought, this is a done deal. The house has been evicted, and now I'm the river, now I'm the mangrove, there's no problem. So of course when I got back and I found out that the house was still inside, that was a little disappointing. And I didn't know how to relate it back here. I didn't know how to bring the rainforest home here. And I started again connecting in dreams. And the house started talking to me again, and Atabe started talking to me again. And she started talking to me about this split, about inner and outer, about that there did not need to be a fight among these brothers. They both had a purpose inside of me. So the house said that I needed to take action. So at this point, the rainforest that was inside of me was instructing me not to replace, but to integrate, and that it knew how to integrate. So show me the way. So in that way, I had to go outside and smell the datura plant that I have right outside my door, and bring in the flowers and smell the flowers. And as I smell the flowers, I see how that corresponds to my groundedness. And I brought in things that I could feel and touch, plants from the outside, even sometimes prickly ones. I brought a little cactus plant, and I put it inside my apartment. And so on. I started bringing all the senses inside, and I started to ground more and more. And I noticed that in doing that in my immediate environment outside, it was easier to ground myself from the outside in, from my house in, than it was from the inside out, ironically. But they were just kind of mirroring each other. And then I started noticing that there was like a circulation, or maybe like Jason was saying before, like a rhythm. So this circulation is something that is innate in my body, and my body knows how it needs to be done. So now my body guides me, or the house guides me, or the garden guides me. But I didn't realize that I didn't need to keep running away, that I could allow a place to allow me to ground and nurture me right now. And I'm going to end by saying that this brought me back to an ayahuasca ceremony that I did in Peru a few years ago. And I had a vision where my chest was a slab of concrete from a Manhattan sidewalk. And through it, this tender, delicate flower emerged. But of course, it was very painful because I had to break through all that concrete. But when it came out, it was delicate. And I remember that saying by Lao Tzu, the softest things in the world overcome the hardest things in the world. And it also reminded me of David Whyte when he said, "You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all other worlds except the one in which you belong."
Yeah. First, I was downstairs and I missed the part that you explained the practice. If you just can briefly say about the practice in 1 minute or less. And then the other question is, when you say the house start talking to me, or my hips start talking to me, are these things that are like your interpretation of the dreams, or in a dream literally start talking to you?
Yeah, thank you. Those are great questions. So in terms of the techniques, there's many more than I had to really cut them down for this presentation, but some of them were the movement and sound conversations that I was having, or movement and sound, where I was allowing movement to spontaneously arise with sound. And when that happened, I noticed that I would get visuals of things to center on, or I would encounter feelings, or I would be guided to how certain feelings were connected to certain parts of my body. The images would correspond to the house, and the feelings would correspond to my body. Another one was I was doing a series of craniosacral treatments when I was in dialogue. So while somebody's holding my body in a particular way, and I'm breathing into that particular place in the body, again, I'm getting like images, or I'm literally seeing or hearing, getting guidance, like inner guidance. Another way was in dreams, because I asked the house to come to me in dreams, and the house took like a shape and a personality in my dreams, and it would come periodically. I also did active imagination exercises with the dreams. And I did a series of other practices, and we can talk about them more later if you're interested.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does this experience, experiencing your old home inside of you, does that affect the way that you make your home currently now in San Francisco or wherever you live?
Yes. In fact, I noticed that I have a cottage in Berkeley.
Okay.
It's about 500 square feet, but then I got a 2,500 square foot garden because I wanted so badly that connection. And before I went, the house was like, the walls are all painted white, everything is kind of very pristine and clean, and there was no color. And even though there's a lot of windows where I could see outside very well, I wasn't really opening up the space to let the air inside, and I had put wind chimes, but they were outside, I couldn't really hear them. And I noticed when I got back, I started putting a lot of color, I changed the textures, I wanted to have the sense of where I'm living now, not even the sense of where I come from, but the sense of where I'm living now, inside the house. And that in doing that, I was grounding in my body. Instead of being disassociated in my thoughts and in crazy thinking or fearful thinking, all of a sudden I was coming back home, but I realized that for so long I disassociated from my body that I needed to make my home a habitable place. And that was, to make my body a habitable place, I had to use nature, I had to use the senses, I had to use my immediate surroundings. And that's what helped me make the transition. Renee?
So you mentioned, I think I get that you felt there would be disapproval from your family, or there was when you left your respectable life and law and marriage and all that. So how was it then being with them in Puerto Rico when you went back? Because that was after the river experience. So how was that?
It was great. I think it was, there were two parts. When I was there, I felt good because I felt held. I realized that when I was preparing for this presentation that I wanted containment, and it has a lot to do with the containing myth. I was thinking about Carol a lot actually when I was working with this, and how I just felt held and protected. That's what I always wanted. I wanted to come back to my body but feel safe in my body, feel protected, feel held. So I was able to sit with them and allow. I just could allow, and things that would bother me normally didn't bother me. But what I noticed happened when I came back was that and this is how the house and the mother live concurrently, share space in my house. You know, they both wanted me to grieve that too. That they wanted me to grieve that there was such thing that I had wanted that I just wasn't gonna have, that wasn't available to me. And it was great that I had this other thing that was supporting me, but I couldn't skip steps, you know, and that's the thing also that I'm noticing in following the rhythms of the plays, is that there's a certain procedure that is inside of me and outside of me, but that I have to tap into and go through. So when I felt really sad and I felt separated from the rainforest and wanting to feel that here, I couldn't tap into that here. In part was because I hadn't grieved, that I couldn't have that relationship with my family the way I wanted. But once I was able to grieve, I could feel and I could come back into my body and I could bring the senses in.
It sounds like the exploration you did is something that we could all benefit from doing ourselves. It sounds like a practice emerging from your journey, that a transformative practice that we could all benefit, exploring body, house, land, ancestry, as a transformative process. You know, I was wondering if is this something that, is this what emerging from the terrapsychology work with Craig? Is this what this invites you, or is it something emerging from your own work in that context? And have you thought about, articulating this as a practice, that other people can benefit too, that you could even help or coach? I don't know.
Definitely. I think that when I came to eco-psychology and terrapsychology, I realized that I finally had language for something that I've been noticing for quite some time. For example, before I left Miami, it was where I used to live before moving here, I realized that I needed to soothe myself because I was feeling a lot of anxiety about leaving and driving cross country. And what I did was I was taking pictures of the sunrise at the same place at the same time every day. And I started putting together those pictures and I realized how they just showed me things about myself. And I was already having this interaction with place. And it happened to me also in different houses and different settings. In fact, there's a lot of other research that I haven't mentioned here that I've done of the similarities between Berkeley and San Juan, actually. There's a lot of them. And things about place that have to do with history and with my own ancestry of my family. So all of that I'm taking into consideration. So yes, I found the terrapsychology, but it found me and I found it, and I feel like this has been me all along. In terms of how I put this together, that's one of the things I'm doing for one of my classes, is how to put together a class that has to do with these and other practices that I've done, where people can take tools but find their own way. Because the idea is that I feel strongly about having yeah, we want to live in our bodies, but it has to feel safe to come back to your body, especially if you've been through trauma like I have. So, you know, how do you come back to your body in a way that is safe and in a pace that is suitable to you? So, I've had a teacher that has taught me a lot of these embodied practices for many years in yoga, and I feel that there's a crossover with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you.